Boy, it's so good to be back and see so many of your faces. I'm so grateful to Ben, and I actually listened to a lot of his sermons. I read the Monday recaps. Allison, thanks for keeping me on the email chain, and I'm just amazed at his teaching. I learned so much. In fact, I've got an email folder where I tuck a lot of his stuff into so I can get back out and maybe plagiarize it later. But I'm so grateful for Ben being here, just for his love for you all, and just the opportunity. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to be back. When you reflect back on ministry, I don't know, I'm kind of a winter Christian. I'm not always sunny and joyful, but when I reflect back, I can think about all of my faults and all the ways that my imperfections, but I just thank you for loving Linda and I so well over the 10 years we were here, because we just have only fond memories of your love for us and your interactions with us, and we're just so grateful for it. So anyway, thank you so much. So good to be back. We miss all of you so much. And I guess maybe Ben didn't want me to do too well this morning, because he gave me this text of Revelation 12. He's probably doing like Matthew 1 or something next week, or Luke 2, but I've got Revelation 12. What do you do to this text? You can't really talk about the Christmas story, Dustin, and have some slides, from National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, or you can't do all this fun stuff. How many of you have a nativity scene in your home? Raise your hands. Okay, so many of you. I think we got this on just a sample on the next slide here. That's a beautiful one. We used to have one. We're kind of trying to sell our house, so a lot of our Christmas stuff's in storage. But we like to. Some of us go to live nativity scenes, and we think about the beauty of this Christmas story. How many of you, next slide, have a dragon in your nativity scene? Because that's what Ben gave me today. He gave me a nativity scene with a big old ugly red dragon. And so this morning, the truth is, what I've learned this week is the whole story of Christmas, the deep story of Christmas, is wondrous and powerful and beautiful, but it's also hard and difficult. And that's what we get to look at this morning. We discover who we are, the kind of world that we live in, and why following Jesus feels really hard at times. And maybe because of our expectations, why it might disappoint us, why it feels like conflict. So you heard the story in Revelation 12. I think what this is a flashback. Linda and I watch some Netflix series sometimes, and oftentimes there's this new thing going on where the show starts with some incredible climactic scene where somebody's in trouble, and then the next thing that happens is like 3 days earlier. Like, that's the next thing. And I hate that. I absolutely hate that. But I think that that's what this is. I think Revelation 12, in the chronological order, in the make sense order of Revelation, it ought to be at the very beginning, because Revelation 12 is telling the believers how things have come to be as they are experiencing them. And it starts with a woman. Now, anytime you start a story in ancient Rome with a woman, you think of Roma, the goddess of Rome, the empire's eternal goddess. There were temples and statues in relief that praised Roma. Often she was seen with eagle's wings, or there would be a crescent moon above her head. She was a source of fertility and fruitfulness and peace and order and supremacy. And that's why her image was all over the empire. She was the one that blessed all people. She was a bearer of Caesar's sons, the sons of the gods. And they were the ones who brought good news, the gospel, to all people. She can also appear as a warrior sitting on spoils of conquest. In Revelation 12, our story starts with a woman crowned, sitting upon a crescent moon, and one who escapes on the wings of eagles. And she's also bearing a son. But we learn really quickly this is not a Caesar. It's not a son of Rome, but of the true King, the coming King, the Son of the living God. But opposing her is a dragon, a wild, violent, devouring persona. And John wants his readers to recognize Rome in the dragon's character, its brutality and arrogance and exploitation and idolatry. And they seek to devour the child, but he's whisked away to God's throne. And then this crazy thing happens. War breaks out in heaven over this child's rule. And Michael and his angels, we all know Michael, right? Michael and his angels go to war against the dragon and his angels. It's like Team God versus Team Dragon. And aren't we glad that Team God wins? Actually, it was never any contest. But the dragon loses, and he's thrown down to the earth. As God becomes incarnate in the world in the Christmas story, evil becomes incarnate in the world at the same time. And the dragon declares war on the woman and her children because he can't get to the Son anymore. And that's us. That's the followers of Jesus. That's our life in this world. If we were to read in the next chapter in John 13, we're not going to do that, but the dragon ends up having some forces that are working with him. They're beasts. They're animated by evil. And they appear to be civil and pious, but beneath these beasts lies something dark because we know they work for the dragon. The first beast and a second beast. The second beast uses its power and propaganda to support the first beast. And I'm not going to go into all the interpretations of these numbers. Boy, there's been a lot of crazy, stupid stuff written about that. And there's been some good stuff, and you've had it because Dr. Best was here. And some of you got to, so I'm not going to go into all that. But they stand for these authorities and the elites of Rome and the cult-promoting machine that oppressed people and made people worship the Caesar as a living God. And we know that the beast number is 666 or maybe 616. We're not sure. But it's a bad number because 7 is God's number and the perfect number. And to get almost all the way to 7 but not quite make it is almost the height of futility. At least 6 is man's number. Humanity in the way that it's self-exalting, always falling short. It's because the way of the dragon is diametrically opposed to the way of the Lamb. So we think that's all good news, but it's not. The dragon loses and he's thrown somewhere, and where he's thrown is here. This furious dragon that is aloof with his beasts on puppet strings. He's rattled, he's vindictive, he's prowling, he's spiteful, he's desperate. And this is a world that John's hearers inhabit. It's a world where the dragon prowls, he's angry, desperate, he's on a short leash until the king returns, until the Son comes back and brings heaven to earth and the kingdom is fully realized. That's the story. Now, what are the challenges? Why do these believers need to hear this story? Well, there are people that are wanting to follow the Lamb, but they're intimidated or maybe even tempted by the power of Rome. Rome, in the first century, it was everything and it was everywhere. And when people looked at the Roman Empire, there was no end in sight. It was all that there was, all they could see. And Rome had its own stories and its own value and its own vision of what endured and what was important and how the world worked. And that was mostly about being connected to Rome and its power. It was about your position, about how much wealth you had, how much control you had. And it was a ranking of people in status and class from higher to lower. That's the way that Rome worked. So think about what it meant to be faithful to Jesus in a culture like that, where you have loss of status because you refuse to worship the beast. You refuse to worship the emperor. In a world where status was everything, you're falling behind. No more invitations, no more honors, no more privileges, no more celebrations with friends because you would not go and worship the emperor. Your siblings, fathers, relatives might cut off relationship with you. There was economic costs, jobs and clients lost. You might be boycotted at your business. You might be passed up for contracts with the government because you didn't have the stamps. You wouldn't bow the knee to Caesar. You weren't given any privileges. In fact, it might even go to the point that the officials would harass you and maybe even persecute you because you wouldn't participate in the process of emperor worship. Now here's the weird thing. For John, the believer's problem is not that they have too much opposition. The believer's problem is they have too little opposition. You've probably read those beginnings, those letters to the 7 churches. And all but 2 churches seem to be thoroughly culturally accommodated. They've forgotten their first love for God and for His children. They've watered down their faith, or they're just kind of giving up. They're sold out. Some of them are just going with the flow of the empire, and they're going to get their security and wealth, and they'll kind of bow the knee to Caesar with crossing fingers behind their back. As one commentator said, it's not that Christians are undergoing persecution, but they have become so much like the world around them that they are not worth persecuting. It's a really curious book because if you didn't have those first few chapters with the letter to the 7 churches that were so scathing, it's almost fearful to read. If you just had the rest of the book, if you just had this story, you would think, man, these people are going through it. They are getting persecuted. They're getting wiped out. And you would think that the beginning of the letter would be John coming up beside a believer and patting them on the back and telling them, it's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. But no, they're challenging. They're pointing out their weaknesses. They're hard letters to hear in that kind of environment. So what does the story do for these believers? I think 4 things that are important. This story in Revelation 12 explains why the government and the authorities are so hostile towards them. I mean, you would think, hey, if you're living this life and you're trying to be just and good, and you just think with everything will work out well in life. I won't have any problems. Everybody ought to appreciate that. But instead, the opposite is happening to them in their culture. And why is that? Well, it's because of what happened in heaven, what happens behind the curtains. It's because of what happens in Revelation 12. What they are experiencing, John says, what you're experiencing isn't just what's going on here, but it's part of a grand cosmic battle that's going on all over the universe. This dragon Satan, his warlord beasts, demand supreme worship. And as we said with historical criticism, this is probably the system of emperor worship, where they're exalting Rome to godlike status, where the emperor is trying to portray himself as all-powerful when he's only 6'6". He's only a man. He cannot endure. And so Revelation 12 says their days are numbered. You suffered a lot, but the reason you're suffering is because this evil is unleashed on the earth. It's a short leash, but it's going to have its day. I think the second reason is he wanted to give his people courage. The main virtue in Revelation is to be faithful, to be loyal, to continue to be allegiant to Jesus no matter what happens. The word faithfulness is used 10 times, witness 13 times. Be a faithful witness. Give a good word for Jesus. Confess him as king no matter what pressure you receive. It urges Christians by their deeds and words to be faithful in love and justice. In fact, Jesus is shown as the one who destroys the work of Satan through his own faithfulness and love, through his own witness. And so John's trying to give his believers courage to be like Jesus. Think about how the story worked. I think Matthew 2 and Romans 8 are the two texts I think about when I read Revelation 12. And I think about how Rome tried to kill Jesus as a baby in Matthew 2, but he escaped. He was cast off into the wilderness. In Matthew 26, they thought they had killed Jesus on the cross, but God raised him from the dead. That's the same way the battle works in Revelation 12. When evil throws its worst at you, Revelation says God's always got another move. He's always got one. And what leads to marginalization and death, well, that confers high privilege in God's sight. John says one day Rome is going to lie on the trash heap of history, but God is going to reign eternally. This deep truth of Revelation 12 is in direct opposition to the world that they see. And John's got to help them to see the deep truth, the world behind the world. I think he says two things here. You're on the winning side, and what you do matters greatly. So he gives them courage. And he talks about the power of witness. In chapter 11, if we went back one chapter, there's this really gruesome, it's even worse than 12. These two witnesses appear, and they are trying to talk about Jesus, the new king, but they're overcome and they're killed. And the people just let their bodies lay out in the city for days, and they trample on the bodies, and they celebrate over the bodies, and they throw feasts over the bodies, and they give each other gifts like it's Christmas over dead bodies. But then they're raised, these two bodies. In life, they look like losers, but the truth is they are victors. And their lives bear fruit as God's enemies at the end of chapter 11 bow in fear. They thought they had conquered them, but they hadn't. In fact, 12:11 says they triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb. This is how they triumphed over their enemies, by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Our witness to Jesus is a form of warfare. It's nonviolent, it's sacrificial, it makes us look like losers. It's truth-bearing, but in the end it bears fruit. It's part of what it means to topple the beast and glorify Christ. These defiant, blood-soaked lives are transforming death into victory. They're defined not by their loss, but by the fact that God will be faithful to them in it. My friend Randy Harris sums up the whole book of Revelation with 3 points. And this is really, if you don't hear anything else, this is just what you need to remember. First point is, God's team wins. Second is, you get to pick a team. God's team wins. You get to pick a team. Third is, don't be stupid. That's what Revelation is trying to do. Give you a view of the whole story in the end. And then it teaches them how to worship, because worship is so important. It rehearses our story. It gives us confidence and courage in our worth. Brueggemann wrote that the imagination is the capacity to host a world other than the one that is right in front of us. That's why slave owners in the South back in the 17 and 1800s did not want their slaves going out into the night and singing songs of worship and praying to God. Because when you worship and you understand what it means to fear the awesome God, all the other powers just shrink in their ability to overwhelm you and intimidate you. So here's the song in the middle of Revelation 12 that we didn't read. It's the worship. Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. And they triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. I love that phrase. Therefore rejoice, you heavens. This is the Advent Sunday for joy. And this is a chapter Ben gives me. And this is the only peace I've got, this one little phrase. Therefore rejoice, you heavens. But Ben didn't read it carefully. But woe to the earth, and you who dwell in them. Because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury because he knows that his time is short. Well, three takeaways here for us. How to watch and wait and witness to the true Messiah. How to be loyal and faithful. And I think the first thing I want to say, and it's not the happiest thing in the world, but it's to groan well. To groan well. Christians should understand about groaning better than anybody else. I didn't say whining. I said groaning. Because we see the world as it really is. We see a broken world. We enter into the world as kingdom people. We enter in and do what God did in Christ. And we do what this church has always done. We see the hurt and the pain, and we try to be faithful in it. And it's really true that the world is darker, and the suffering and pain of the world is more extreme than most of us experience it. Certainly, and we don't have to imagine very much or pay much attention to the news to know how that's true in many, many other places in the world, but it's true in this town. It's true in the town that I live in. It can be a really dark place. People can really, really struggle and suffer. And so Romans 8 describes our posture now as believers as a posture of groaning, like a woman in childbirth. Guys, the baby has not yet been born, but it will be one day. And the truth is, nothing finite in the world can satisfy the longing that you have for God. And the story of us, much of the time, is to try to satisfy that longing, try to get that security, to try to find that rest in all of these other places that are not God. But not even the best of who we are together as a church will fulfill that longing. If you don't know what I'm talking about, maybe you're too in love with a job or a hobby or a notoriety or your worship style or something. But most of us know what that ache's about. We know what it is. And sometimes things happen into our lives that give us a little crack in our security. And we're wise enough in those moments to know that this is pointing to the goodness of God. Because we have control over almost nothing in this world. Nothing. And here's a hard truth for you today. The love of God protects you from nothing. From nothing. It won't protect you from illness. It won't protect you from cancer. It won't protect you from people betraying you. It won't protect you from financial ruin. The love of God will protect you from nothing. Back to Romans 8. What we can count on, despite danger, fire, sword, loss of life, illness, what we can count on is that none of that will separate us from the love of God. We cannot count on that he will protect us from it all, which is exactly why he says, when all this stuff happens in your lives, it will not separate you from me. And that's because man and his ways ultimately fail. They're never satisfying. They're not life-giving. Guys, everything here has a number, and that number is 666. And it hovers over every human endeavor, over every way that you try to secure yourself and protect yourself and keep things safe apart from God. And our task is not to give the world easy answers, but to dwell faithfully with them as God will dwell faithfully with us. And so we groan. And in our groaning, we attend to the places where God does show up with his love. Secondly, we hope well. The easiest application of Romans 12 is a political one, if I got your attention now. And I would just give it one sentence. The kingdom of heaven was doing very well before the United States of America came into existence. And the kingdom of heaven will be doing very well when the United States of America is no longer in existence. But let's go for the metaphorical one so I don't get in trouble and you want me to come back someday. I asked Wayne this morning. Have you ever noticed that when you lose something, you always find it in the last place you looked? When you receive what you've hoped for, you quit hoping. And there is a day coming when everything you ache for and everything that pains your heart will go away and that ache will be fulfilled. And on that day, hope will die. And what will be left? The relentless, pursuing, filling love of God in everything. Sometimes this time of year, people like to go see Handel's Messiah or listen to it. If you don't have anything to do for several hours, you can go do that. The Hallelujah Chorus, right? That's what we're waiting for. So when does it come? Does it come at the birth of Christ? No. How about at the death and resurrection? Can we hear it then? No. What about the ascension? Surely we'll hear the Hallelujah Chorus at the ascension. No. We got to wait all the way to the second coming. That's why hope is always with us. That's why we never give up. It's what we experience in even the darkest moments. And it is powerful even if it's as small as a grain of mustard seed. It can move mountains. And last, we love well. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. The best way we witness the gospel is all the ways we give our lives away. And I can't help think of Miss Lily. The stories yesterday, her care and compassion, the way she lived her life. Another way to frame that is Miss Lily was a warrior. She was in the army of God, fighting a cosmic battle against a red dragon. Just think about it that way. Every selfish impulse resisted. Every act of kindness, every resistance to evil, every loss that we experience here for Jesus, every word of truth we offer, that is part of the triumph of God. Paul would say, the dark night of evil is nearly over. The day of Christ's return is almost here. So let us get rid of the works of darkness that harm us, and let us do the works of light that protect us. Empire's story is fading. The Lamb's story endures. Merry Christmas. I love y'all.